So let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. Today we're joined by Corey. Corey is the Senior Director of Frontier Finance Transformation here at Microsoft. He leads Microsoft's Global Frontier Finance Initiative, where he's helping finance teams use AI to move from reporting to real-time decision-ready insights. He's got almost 20 years in Microsoft's Office of the CFO, and really has been at the center of Microsoft's finance transformation. So, in helping and drive AI adoption across everything from forecasting to planning and core finance processes. So while he's doing this while balancing innovation with governance at scale here at Microsoft. So we're excited to hear really practical lessons from Microsoft's frontier finance journey. Corey, did I miss anything?
No, you overplayed it already, Jeffrey. But thank you. It's great to
Awesome.
be
Well,
here.
then I'll go ahead and hand things over to you, Corey. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, great to be here. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, hi everybody. It's great to be with you. As Jeffrey said, I'm just a finance guy. I'm a customer of Microsoft. It just so happens that I work at Microsoft in our finance department, and we are tasked with changing the way that we work here in our finance group. So the team asked me to come and share some of the things that we're doing. I'm happy to be here. Happy to kind of share some of the things. As Jeffrey mentioned, feel free to post questions as we go along. I'll try to monitor the Q&A, and we can pause at different intervals and see what questions you've got. We can make this as interactive as possible when you have 100 people on the line. So I will fire up my screen here, and we will get rocking. All right. So Amy Hood is our CFO. She's been CFO now for 13 years. And if we've learned anything in the past 8 years that I've been doing this for her, we've learned that the tone of the top matters. And Amy's done a great job pushing our finance team to adopt technology and to literally reshape the way that we work and push the boundaries of what's possible. Many of you on this call are finance leaders with an equal vision, with a similar approach, and your passion for this is going to be so essential. So the essential ingredient in enabling organizations to transform. It comes from the top. And the other secret is to meet that with a grassroots enthusiasm, with a culture that enables you to do that. As Amy says here, we leverage advanced technologies by Microsoft to enable our finance teams to keep up with the pace of growth and to really transform the way that we work. My goal today is to show you some of those practical examples and give you kind of a sense of what we're doing and hopefully inspire you on your own journey as you're doing the same. Quick context, since I think not everyone on the phone is in finance, so I just want to level set, like what do we even mean by finance? What do we mean by frontier finance? These are all the various processes, the primary finance processes that Amy is accountable for. Everything from accounting, record to report, to billing and collections, quote to cash, and tax, treasury, FP&A would be your typical management reporting, budgeting, planning, forecasting, etc. Procure to pay is in finance as well, and risk management and compliance. Amy also is accountable for real estate, security, corporate development, so acquisitions, venture integration, as well as business development. So all the relationships that Microsoft has with content creators of all kinds, and even folks like OpenAI and others. So finance is really a broad spectrum here at Microsoft. We have a lot of different teams. We have a lot of processes. We touch a lot of systems. And so when you think about building a frontier finance organization, you kind of start here. You start with what your processes are, what your people are, where you have bottlenecks, where you have opportunities to improve efficiency, and it all starts there. Your journey is going to look different than ours from this standpoint, but there'll be a lot of similar principles. So I'll touch on some of those similar things. I always love to share this chart just because it's a great way to kind of talk about where we've been and where we're going a little bit. There's three stories on this slide actually. The first few years, you can see headcount growing in lockstep with revenue, our finance headcount. And that was the traditional way that most companies work, right? As your business grows, you add another, 10, 20, 50 people at the problem, right? Armed with nothing other than Excel spreadsheets. That was traditionally through the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s. That was the way that Microsoft worked. Starting at about 2006, 2007, you can see a little shift there. We shifted our headcount. You can see it flattening out. That's when we stepped back and asked ourselves what tasks we wanted finance people to do. And we started outsourcing certain tasks that we didn't feel like we needed to have, really, some of these super smart people doing. And those were some of the transactional manual tasks like paying invoices or picking up the phone and collecting money from customers, or triaging a bunch of information from an RFP, or even things like reconciliations. There were certain tasks that we thought, we can just outsource these. And by the way, that was 20 years ago. Today, if you haven't done that, it's a good exercise to do, because to our point about process, there are a lot of tasks that go into a process, and many of those tasks are time consuming, but they're manual. Those are the kind of tasks that are great to optimize with AI today. 20 years ago, so we outsourced certain tasks, we kept our headcount flat, we kept up with that ever-growing revenue line there. And then in 2016, you see a big inflection point. That was when Microsoft went all in on cloud and services like AI. And I always tell people at that point, our ability to keep our headcount fairly flat is because we, as a customer of Microsoft, went all in on the promise of moving to the cloud and adopting services like AI to streamline the work that we do. And many of the tasks that we went after initially were some of the tasks we outsourced, a decade earlier, but also just enabling our people to do their best working to keep up with the pace of growth in the company. That's a huge motivation for us, and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. So there's a few little principles in here, right? Like it's moving away from having everything be, mundane and manual and just throwing people at the problem. It's stepping back, it's analyzing your processes, it's figuring out what tasks people can do versus other kinds of labor. In this new era, we're thinking about digital labor. What can digital labor help us with? And then just leveraging technology to be able to keep up with the pace of growth and be able to scale and do things more efficiently. Those are the kind of main principles that we think about as we build our finance function, as we move to a frontier finance model. And so just layering on top a couple of the key building blocks for us on that timeline. It's a long time. You no matter where you are, you will do this a lot faster than we did. This is retrospective, right? Looking back over the past 13 years, what are the key steps that we've put in place? You can't really leapfrog these too much, but you can do it a lot faster. But you do need to do probably every step of the process if you look vertically. So we think a lot about culture. How do you build a culture that enables your people to participate in this journey? That's really important. We think a lot about culture, and that becomes more important today when we're reevaluating work and we're reevaluating processes. What's the role of the person in the process? And I'll tell you, it's super critical still. But also we depend on our people to adopt a growth mindset and become change agents and think about how to reinvent processes and how to use technology in different ways. That's all really, really important. It's hard to overstate how important that is. Part of the culture too is learning new tools, right? So we have a great learning program here in our team where we train people on building agents and using Copilot and all of those kind of things. Data is the next line there, and data is so essential. I can't overstate how important it is to get a data platform right. We were very fortunate that Satya, as a new CEO, when he joined in 2014, Satya Nadella, he felt the need to unify our data platform. He asked finance to own it. We used some of the new Azure tools and moved this data to the cloud and created a data lake to ingest hundreds of data sources. And we, finance, built a unified data platform for the company. That has paid so many dividends ever since. We still own it today. We have over 100,000 monthly active users who use this data in some way, shape, or form in our company every month. And And so having a unified data platform of some kind is really helpful. Most of you will think, I don't have it, I don't have a unified data platform. And that's probably your reality, but you can get there. We didn't have it either, right? We just have done it in stages over the past decade. We started with one area and we tackled it, and then we've expanded it since. But you can't go around it. You got to have good data. It's becoming easier and easier to create that unified data platform, by the way. There's lots of great tools, but you still have to do it. A litmus test, by the way, that I use all the time with people when they come and they say, I want AI to do this thing. My initial question is, can you generate a report in a reasonable amount of time to do what you want to do? Can you do it manually today, in other words? And if they say, no, I have to go, like generally, you have to go get data from over here, and then you have to pass it to this person, you have to scrub it over here, and you have to do this. If that's the answer, then they're not ready for AI. You gotta be able to say, yeah, no problem. I got the data. I can generate that report in Excel, within a couple hours or whatever. I just love AI to do it faster. Then you're in a good spot to really put AI on top of it. So BI is obviously the reporting layer on top. We don't need to go too deep into that. We've been on the AI journey about a decade. We started with forecasting using, at the time, brand new tools called Azure Machine Learning. We've never looked back. They've transformed the way that we forecast everything in our finance department. We started building chatbots for recommendations. Today, we would call those Copilot. We've got a lot of history of what it takes to build and train a chatbot. Those have paid dividends in the new era of Copilot, of course. And we've been automating with AI. So using tools like machine learning and other tools, we've been identifying low-risk activities like reconciliations and invoice payments and other things. And we've automated a lot of those, and we've saved a lot of BPO costs actually over the time, and we've just streamlined a lot of processes. Now we find ourselves in this new era, in an era of generative AI, where everything is agentic, where we have these language models that can reason over tasks. It's amazing. It's an amazing moment to be in. It's truly supercharging the work that we can do in a really interesting way. And the way that we think about it is leveraging some research done by Microsoft. We think about our Gen AI journey in these three patterns, and this is the way we've shaped our whole program. If you want to go look this up, it's a work trends index report done by Microsoft. We took it, as a customer of Microsoft, and we thought, how does this apply to us? And this has been basically guiding the work that we do in our team, in my team. So pattern one is about helping people think about AI, their AI assistant, to help them get their work done. So in effect, we've given every one of our employees an executive admin, right? A co-pilot, to help them do their jobs. And these executive admins, just like the human equivalents, are great at a lot of general purpose tasks, right? They're great at taking notes in meetings. They're great at helping us schedule stuff. They're great at helping summarize information. They're great at basic analysis. They're great at all kinds of things. And so training our people to develop habits, to delegate tasks to an AI assistant is really important. That's part of pattern one. Pattern two, human-led agents. Agents are different than assistants, kind of like a subject matter expert is different than a generalist, right? So for us, these agents are more optimized for a specific task. So for example, we'll build agents to do something like reconciliation, or to prep an earnings press release, or to maybe do our close review deck, or even something as simple as like extracting data from a contract, let's say. Each of those is an agent that's optimized for a specific task or for a specific set of knowledge. And in this pattern two, it's about a human knowing how to call the right agent for the right job. Just like throughout history, we could all pick up a phone and call that subject matter expert that we know is a domain expert in a particular area. So that's how we think about pattern two. Pattern three then gets interesting when you can take some of those agents that are optimized for specific tasks and orchestrate them together behind the scenes to actually do a more compound set of actions. So this is where we would go apply it to something like sourcing, for example, or like building that close review process, or collections, for example. Those are each more robust processes in which we need multiple agents all working in concert with each other to accomplish that task. And so that pattern three is called human-led, agent-operated. Now, the important ingredient in all three patterns is the same: human. human with, human led. And so we're on a journey to train our people to use Copilot, to use agents, to oversee, to build and train these pattern 3 agent operated work streams. But it really comes down to people and how they lean into this moment. I'll give you a few examples of some of these. Actually, let me just stop sharing. I'll see if there are any questions so far in Q&A real quick before I just keep barreling ahead. It's loading for me here. And if you have, I don't see any posts yet, perhaps.
Yeah, no questions yet, Corey.
Okay, excellent. So feel free to add them. I will. There's something in chat here. Let's see. I love our story. How you tell it. Can you share what solutions you're using so when we tell our story, it aligns with how we're recommending to acquire? Yeah, Copilot Studio. Okay, that's a good question. So let me start with that one. So we use the breadth of the Microsoft stack. I'm going to share this screen again. And maybe I'll share it in 2 ways, actually. I'll step back really quickly and talk about how we build agents first, how we build anything, frankly. And then I'll talk about the tools that we use, so you kind of get a sense of both. So I created a very simple slide that, is so simple, it probably is maybe overly simplistic, but a lot of people just don't think about these steps in such a way. And so a lot of customers that I interact with, they haven't really stepped back to really ask themselves what they want to build and what it would look like and all these things. So our process for building custom agents or doing anything, frankly, in this new era of AI starts with mapping processes and ideating. So it's all about process improvement, right? Before you can do anything, you first need to map out processes. So before you jump to the technology, you got to understand what you want to do. Then you analyze and prioritize. So for us, this is really important. You don't have infinite resources. We don't have infinite resources in our finance team. Amy, as you can all imagine, she keeps us focused on the highest value work. And so we build business cases. Then finally, we architect the solution. And we use a breadth of Microsoft tools, depending on what the solutions require and what they look like, what the speed or the time required would be, et cetera. And then we launch the solution and we measure the impact that it has. So on the first one, a lot of teams, in fact, I was just in our executive center where we have customers come, and this came up. And actually in the room, these great executives from a company jumped straight into solving some pain point that they had. Almost jumping straight to architecting a solution. That happens a lot, rather than stepping back and even asking if that's the right process. And so Amy Hood, our CFO, created this slide a few years ago and started challenging her team, her leaders, to own the process of continuous improvement, to map out their processes that they own, to try to take something like, say, collections or like billing or any of the BPO processes have been great places for us to start, or others. Map them out, understand all the moving parts, all the systems, the dependencies, the various players, the stakeholders, and then first ask ourselves, where can we simplify? Where can we remove constraints? Amy loves to say, start with stop. What can we stop doing? Those are great ways to start. Then finally comes the tech enablement. Once we map a process and reimagine the ideal process, then comes the technology. And these are Amy's words. Yes, AI is in parentheses, meaning it doesn't always have to be AI. In fact, what we're finding is we get more ideas from our teams. A lot of times they actually just have a data problem, frankly, right? They just need better data so they can make better decisions. And yeah, maybe you can strap a little, connect it to Copilot somehow. But frankly, it comes down to data 9 times out of 10. And then we measure outcomes and we create business value, and around it goes. So we start here. We started there a couple of years ago. And when we challenged our leaders and our teams to go away and ideate and come back with some great ideas, they did so. They came back immediately, spring 2023, almost 3 years ago, with 130 great project ideas for us. And these, they were all different kinds of maturity, different types of things, different teams. I used Copilot at the time to create this slide. 3 years later, it's still a great slide. It's still, Copilot created these 4 categories. People wanted to summarize info, they wanted to generate content, simple recommend actions, and simplify tasks. On the left side there, summarize info, generate content. Those are primarily pattern 2 type activities. On the right side, recommend actions, simplify tasks. Those are more pattern 3. And from a technology perspective, we'll kind of bring it back in a second, but primarily, those things like summarize info, generate content, generally we could do a lot of it with Copilot, with a simple agent, built-in agent builder, or maybe Copilot Studio. On the right side, when we talk about recommending actions, simplifying tasks, generally we're moving more into pattern 3. Generally, we have a lot heavier influence of Azure Foundry, and those kinds of activities, and frankly, other pieces of the Microsoft tech stack, including Dynamics and other things. So this is kind of that first step. We map out processes, we figure out the processes, then we ideate, then we go and analyze each of these different business cases, basically, and we prioritize them. And so this is an example of a business case that we built. One of the kind of recurring ideas on that last slide was for sourcing, part of our procurement process here at Microsoft. And so we asked that sourcing team to help us create a business case. What are you trying to solve? What are your objectives? What are your stakeholders? And what's the investment needed to build this thing? And what would be the return if we do build it? That's the part that Amy cares about the most, of course. A lot of companies skip this. And it's going to get them into trouble. And a lot of account teams skip this, and it's going to get them into trouble. So I challenge your teams to, focus on, going down, making a business case, make sure they're behind it. They pick something that they feel, passionate about. Part of the benefits obviously can be intangible, soft benefits like time savings and other things too. And then we always, under other details, we start asking ourselves, what are the considerations? We start asking ourselves, what kind of models may we need to use? What kind of, data will we need? All those kind of things are actually super important, and start teeing this up. For the sourcing agent, which we're looking at here, this was how we ended up building this, right? If I start on the right side with data, we knew we had unstructured data that came from these bids. A lot of unstructured information. We had some structured information in our databases, information about our past relationship with these vendors, for example. And so you can see some of the tools that we used here, right? So then we're not leading with technology. We're not starting with Copilot Studio and saying like, hey, what can we do with Copilot Studio? We start with the problem. We start with the situation. We always start with data generally. And we ask ourselves, what data are we going to need to get, and where do we need to store that data? And so you can see actually there's even a slightly different approach here for unstructured versus structured data. For the unstructured data, we pulled that into Azure Data Lake, and we used Azure AI Search, which we use a lot, to pre-index that data. That's really important for the vast quantity of unstructured information that we're getting from our vendors. And then for the structured data, we have a lot of databases, and so this is Azure Data Factory primarily into SQL to store this particular data about these vendors and suppliers. And then for this one in particular, steps 3, 4, and 5 there towards the left-hand side, because we were really customizing this, we leaned heavily on the Azure Foundry suite of tools. We use a lot of, we evaluate all the different models. We're building different mini agents to do things like extraction and sentiment analysis and comparison and searching and filtering. And this is really important. We love the flexibility that Foundry provides for us. And so we do use a ton of Foundry when we're building like this, these very custom agents. And then we create some front-end user interface on the far left side, a way for people to interact with this. And so in this particular case, we launched this thing. We launched it in I guess it took us most of that first year. It was a great success. We met our target for the return in the first year, $10 million. Very minimal investment, by the way. We're on track to actually even exceed our initial ROI threshold for this one. Saved us thousands of hours as well. If I zoom in here, so you can kind of see what this looks like. This sourcing agent now, imagine all the bids that Microsoft gets, all the RFPs that we do. It analyzes all this information, it brings it in, it compares it to our databases, compares them to each other, and then it comes back and says, I recommend that this is the best vendor for this particular need. This is fire suppression systems, right? For RFP 13356. Alternatively, vendor B, vendor C are also great candidates. Here's some similarities. Here's the differences. I'm going to pull the balance of trade from our systems, all the other detail that you human need to make a decision, and I'm going to provide it all for you. And what we love in finance, whenever you build agents in finance, we love Foundry because it also provides us the flexibility of creating some audit mechanisms. And so up at the top of that first tab, if you click research summary, you actually zoom into this layer here. This is kind of our audit tab. In finance, it's really important to cross-check numbers. We need a way to go in and see what this agent is doing. And so in this case, we kind of built our own audit tab here so that people can come in and see, okay, for each of these vendors in these different columns, we're asking the agent to evaluate and score it by a set of criteria. That's how it came up with its recommendation. Each of these is like a mini agent, and this allows us to come in and audit and see what these agents do, right? How did it evaluate business group spend? Are we comfortable with that? How did it evaluate SRM performance, evaluator scores, etc.? So this is a good example of an end-to-end process for us, and how we do this in real time, currently in our finance department. And we've developed a lot of maturity over the last many years building solutions like this. Back to the original question, just to put maybe drive this home. You asked what tools do we use? And maybe a better question is what tools don't we use? But here is a Corey Hernstrick slide. Marketing has not sanctioned this slide, but I went through all of the solutions that we've built over the last many years, and I found that there's a lot of common tools that we use. And we use whatever tool is the best tool for the particular job. And so for data, we use a ton of Azure services, of course. We use Data Factory, Data Lake, Fabric, and SQL, as you saw there. We use a little bit of Dataverse here and there. We use a lot of Excel, actually, and SharePoint for simple things, of course. On the analytics side, we're heavy users of Foundry, as you saw. We use Power Builder. We use we get into a bunch of CRM. We do use a lot of D365 CRM in different cases. For decisions and actions, right? That's where we really get into tools like Copilot Studio, especially for low-code, no-code type things. Agent Builder, I think I need to change this. It used to be AI Builder. Agent Builder, Power Automate even for actions still comes into play. Now more and more, we've got agents and agent flows. So that's kind of a very high-level overview of how I would answer that question if asked, even by a customer. We use the broad suite of Microsoft tools. We think about them as the 88 keys on a standard keyboard. We can combine them and mix and match them in infinite varieties of ways to accomplish literally anything that we need to build. And so we do use them. We use them all in various ways. Maybe this is a good time to even pause really quickly and say today we have about 2,000 agents in finance. About 1,500 of those agents are built by citizen developers, people on our finance team who we train to build agents. They primarily are building using Agent Builder, using Copilot Studio, and building agents in places like SharePoint. We also have, the remaining 500 agents are built either by pro-code teams within various functional groups, say tax or treasury, with a mix of Copilot Studio into Azure. And then we have a technical team, kind of, if you will, like a finance IT shop that sits in finance, that owns the data platform and other resources. That team primarily uses the Azure suite of tools, and in some cases, tools like Dynamics to streamline enterprise-grade processes for us. I hope that was a very long-winded answer to that question, but hopefully it helped. So let me give you a couple other examples of things that we're learning. One thing that we're learning is how possible it is, because of our approach to technology, because of our use of these great tools from the platform, we're learning how easy it is to rinse and repeat, to reuse code from one application to the next. A good example is kind of a good follow through with the sourcing agent that I just showed you. As we started building the sourcing agent, we were also in parallel building 5 of the other solutions that Amy highlighted for us, right? And one was a launch agent for our deal desk. One was a One was a contract review compliance agent, et cetera, et cetera. And we started realizing, wow, we're basically building the same set of agents for all these different scenarios, even though they're very different from each other. So we took a step back actually, and we decided that we would build a little bit more of an intelligent suite of tools that could be mixed and matched to accomplish anything related to documents, for example. So even though finance, when you think about finance, you typically think about numbers. However, we also handle 80 different document types we calculated, right? If you think about contracts and invoices and policies and many different types of documents. So we started asking ourselves, how do we just create a way that we can create these kind of enrichment pipelines, these little mini agents or AI skills that I already showed you, summarization, keyword extraction, comparison, translation, that could work across multiple different documents. We call that platform Tolstoy. And so through the process of building out the sourcing agent and others, our team here, our dedicated technical team, realized a very efficient way to combine the same services, Azure OpenAI Service, Document Intelligence, Azure AI Search, Translator, to create these little microservices or mini agents that do extraction, comparison, translation. This is 3 years ago, by the way, so a lot of this has evolved in the product suite. 3 years ago, tools like Copilot Studio did not exist. So we built our own way to orchestrate a pipeline, a workflow, to stitch these things together. So we could do a translator, hand off to a text extractor, hand off to a prompt builder, hand off to a file creator. What that could do in essence is, for contracts, for example, take a Bosnian contract like this one with handwritten notes that in the past we would have to send out for 2 weeks to be translated. And instead, we just give it to the translate agent, right? The translator agent comes back almost immediately with this contract translated to English with all these handwritten notes, kind of transcribed into something that's readable. And then we hand it off to the extraction agent, right? It's again kind of homegrown. And then we hand off to a prompt builder agent. We figured this is a really kind of ingenious thing that our engineers came up with to basically create an infinitely customizable workflow here, so that an end user even could come in and give user preferences within the prompt to say, here's your role. You're analyzing this particular contract or this particular document with this role, with this particular set of objectives. That's really helpful because we can, even though we may have a standard run for documents of a certain type, we could still customize it for different tranches or different objectives, which is really helpful. We also built out this, in this case, user interface. We used Power Apps, another good example of using a piece of the toolkit, because we just wanted we were trying to get this off the ground really quickly. This one in particular we built in 3 months from start to finish, and so Power Apps is a great way to just get started. And we wanted people to be able to upload a contract, be able to go through a kind of a robust workflow that I just showed you with some of those Azure services, and be able to spit out this very structured detail. So go from a Bosnian contract to extracted information in a table that a finance person can read, and that actually already does some compliance checks for me. So in this case, you see, hey, you're missing signatures, right? Or we could click on discount and margin calculators or other things and see how this aligns with policy or certain things. So this approach, one thing that we learned was by packaging it up in this way, we could scale our impact. We could actually accelerate our ability to drive a return on investment. By the end of the first year with Tolstoy alone, with this approach, we had delivered 16 agentic solutions for 2,500 users in our finance group, and saved about 15,000 hours through many different finance areas: audit, expenses, invoicing, POs, etc. This is a huge breakthrough for us, where we realized, there's huge power in stepping back, evaluating the processes, evaluating the different tasks, and then orchestrating these agents that can be infinitely mixed and matched to help accomplish more compound tasks. It really is. This is what gave us that vision, that pattern 3 would be so powerful, right? Pattern 3 is about multiple agents or skills being able to be orchestrated behind the scenes to go accomplish compound tasks of many, many different variety. So this is maybe a good use case of that. And by the way, the sourcing agent that I showed you before was built then on this Tolstoy platform. We kind of built it in parallel. So that's some of the info about how we talk about document intelligence, which we have a lot of in finance. Stepping back again, one thing that everybody wants to talk about if you're in finance is numerical data, what we call data intelligence, which is really important. We think about it similarly to document intelligence, but also with a slight nuance, right? The nuance is we need computational analysis to be one of our pipelines. And we can use some of the others too, by the way. Even when we're dealing with numbers, we still generally are doing things like keyword extraction and comparison and maybe writing commentary, things like that. However, the big breakthrough that we've had on numerical data is realizing that LLMs aren't great at numbers, but they are great at writing code. And so the step 4 in this little workflow here, the core kind of essence that we realized was the power of translating natural language, a user query using LLM, into code, into SQL or DAX or Python or something else, because code doesn't hallucinate. Code is powerful at analyzing numbers. And so the way that we've gone about this is, I'll flash this up. Here is our data platform that we put in place about a decade ago. We're in the process of upgrading, migrating everything to Fabric, by the way. But it's a process for us. So this is still kind of our legacy architecture that we're still primarily using. But this has served us well for a decade now. We ingest about 400 data sources. We transform it, meaning we create conformed hierarchies and taxonomies. We create analytics layers for different domains, different data domains. So that the Xbox team just has a cube, a tabular model in SQL that serves the Xbox business. They don't have to look at all the Azure and Office and other information. And people can basically connect Power BI or Excel to this reporting structure. We enforce MS Sales and Mercury, our systems of record. We enforce those security models all the way to the edges. And so we have about 55,000 monthly active users who connect directly to these tabular models. We also syndicate our data to our partners, such as Sales, who use it to connect to create their reporting platforms that they use, such as MSX Insights. And that's another 75,000 monthly active users or so. So all told, finance owns the data platform for over 100,000 monthly active users at the company. So that's just kind of laying the groundwork there. Our big breakthrough was starting to realize that even with a pretty clean, very centralized data strategy, we still needed to do some work to enable AI to be useful here. And so one of the first things that we did was to basically go and start thinking about making each of those SQL tables a data connector. Initially, we did it by basically pre-indexing the metadata in the SQL tables and trying to optimize it for RAG, right, for retrieval augmented generation for Copilot. And we created our own connector store. And then we went all in on using prompt engineering to translate natural language queries into code, into SQL or into Python or into DAX. On the far right side is the best example of a actual SQL query. This is a query entered in Hindi, translated from Hindi to English to SQL. The SQL query executes and it brings back the result and translates it back into Hindi. We didn't train on the language. That's something that language models do really well. And it did a great job writing the SQL code. And so we just turned this on the far left side, excuse me. You can see like an example. Show me security Azure consumed revenue in UK, France, and Germany in these years. We can generate a SQL query for that, and it can run and execute every time. And so for 3 years now, 2.5 years, we've been running this process. It works really well. The 3 screen grabs in the middle show maybe a more complex task, which in this case, kind of our orchestrator in the background knew that SQL wouldn't do it, and so it chose to write Python instead to do a simple prediction, kind of a simple forecast on the fly, and be able to even tweak it and say, oh, I use simple linear method, but I could also try exponential smoothing. Those are cool things, like a reasoning engine with a Python engine behind the scenes can do some cool things. So this is how we started, because there was no product on the market when we began that could do this. And Amy was impatient, and so we just went all in on this. In the meantime, Azure Fabric launched a whole suite of tools, including Fabric data agents and other cool capabilities that do many of these things. We've been working with the Fabric team, giving them lots of feedback, working with them to deploy this. And so currently our plan is to we are rolling out all of our data estate into Fabric, rolling over, I should say, into Fabric and creating Fabric data agents. The big benefit to that is you can do all the things that I specified here, but they provide a lot more around ontology and being able to actually dictate the user's preferences and the user's requests, even simple nuances that we realized that were really challenging when we were trying to do it on our own, where things like if Amy asks a question about revenue, she's expecting a different answer than if Judson, our chief commercial officer, asks the same question about revenue. Amy generally wants a net revenue answer. Judson typically would want a build revenue number. Those numbers are different, right? How does the co-pilot, how does the agent know that? By being able to specify it in something like Fabric IQ, for example, or in the ontology to be able to specify how things respond. So this is a really big area. It's super complicated for most companies. First step is you got to have your data in a unified place, but then there's these great tools that enable you to do some powerful things with the data once you have it there. How are we doing on time? Let me pause again. Let me see if there's any questions. I've got some more examples I can go through too, but
yeah, Corey, we've got some questions in the chat. I was waiting for you to come to a pause. Is now a good time?
Now it's perfect. Let's do it.
Perfect. So the first question is, how does the sourcing strategy agent work when a change is desired, as opposed to status quo of any sort of existing data scoring?
Yeah. So, I mean, the great news about the sourcing agent, it's a good case of human-led, agent-operated, right? So the human-led part is important. Basically, this agent's off running a bunch of different agents and comes back with a recommendation, but ultimately the human has to make the decision. So in that case, right, the human would look at it and say, hey, like, I don't agree with that, right? That's great. I understand why the agent came up with that, but here's another perspective, and that's fine. So if you look at the time that it takes us to do an RFP now, we've shaved off, we've gone from an average of 20 weeks to, more like, 12, 13 weeks, something like that. So we've certainly shaved off a bunch of time, but we're still taking 12, 13 weeks, right? So meaning this isn't autonomous. Agents aren't doing it all on their own, right? Like you're not just, the way I read the question is, if you were autonomous, how would the agent know if there's some nuance in a specific bid or whatever? That's much harder. We're going to get there eventually, but at this stage, it's still very much about having the human in the loop, but using an agent to accelerate this time, to streamline whatever parts of the process we can. And then if there's a change desired, a human can make that call. And so that's okay. So that's how I would answer that one.
That's good.
Here, let's see. What challenges did we face during the adoption? Recommendation and key points to look out for. Yeah, there are so many challenges. We could spend a lot of time on this, but let me flash up this slide, because I think it's also a good way, since we're getting close to the end of our Prezzo too. It's a good way to kind of wrap some things up too. So here's some insights from our AI journey. And I would say, that each of these has potential pitfalls and challenges, and have for us, for sure. So we think some of the big parts of our success are around culture, process, data, and security and compliance. I'll maybe, using the question, I can talk about each of these, right? Culture, you can see here, like it's really about empowering people. It's about, you got to bring finance people along on the journey. They're typically somewhat skeptical of change, right? Like we're risk averse by nature in finance. And so how do you reward risk takers? How do you showcase their work? How do you, help people actually take a calculated risk? And so we've done that through many different ways. Amy gives CFO awards every quarter to innovators who are changing the way we work. We do lots of training in my team. Every 2 weeks, we're doing a training on Copilot or agents or something. My team exists to create that synergy between teams, right? Otherwise, you start getting people, working in vacuums or silos. There's lots of potential pitfalls and problems with rolling this out and just having it fall flat and fall on its face. So building culture, having a team or somebody like me and my team to actually foster this along. That's why we exist, basically. Shape the culture of the team, share best practices, create this mindset shift and the skill set shift that's required to make the change. Process, I highlighted that briefly, but again, just to touch on it, man, it's so important. Big problems that I see still in finance in our team sometimes, and a lot with customers, is people just dive into a project. They just pick a thing and they start putting AI on it, and they don't first step back and even ask if they should be doing the process in the same way, right? They're just trying to automate a bad process versus asking themselves why. Who owns the vision? We're learning a lot recently about, even in this era of citizen development, how important it is to prioritize these projects. Otherwise, you just run rampant and everybody runs a million different directions. So we've even built more recently an ideation hub, this funnel that helps us take ideas and prioritize them and get leaders to weigh in on the ideas that have the most merit or that they think have the biggest our bang for the buck. For example, then have an invested stakeholder oversee the project from idea all the way to launch. Those are really important things that I think there's some pitfalls there. On the data side, lots of different, I think, big challenges that people have. One big challenge I'll mention is just not getting started. A lot of people just, they suffer, a paralysis by over-analysis of their data problem. A lot of companies I work with, they just feel like the data's got to be perfect until they can start, and then they end up not starting ever, because the data is probably never going to be totally perfect. And so one thing that we did that worked really well is, at Satya's request, he gave Amy initially 3 months to build a data lake to solve a big business review we called mid-year review back in the day. And so we didn't solve it all. We didn't solve all data, but we solved that review. And that taught us a lot about how to build unified data platforms. And we just got started, and then it's evolved ever since, right? And so that's really important. I think we're learning a lot about just the speed at which we need to work. We're learning a lot, I think, about how to democratize insights and data to our teams. There are a lot of mistakes that people make as they try to maybe control the data a little bit too much. We've always had this principle of creating discipline at the core, but still allowing flexibility at the edges. That really enables this trust and enables us to really, have the discipline at the core part is important. A lot of companies make the mistake of not having that discipline. We did as well for the first 40 years of our history. But then allowing the flexibility at the edges is really important, and more important in the era of AI. How do you do that? Possible mistakes that people are making now is about security and compliance, actually, around that data. That's super important to have governance structures. I showed you briefly that we have row-level security all the way to the edges. Think about provisioning these connectors. Think about all of those different considerations are really important when you're working with data. And then the security and compliance piece. A lot of companies, I think, are diving into some AI projects without taking a step back and understanding what are their key kind of North Star principles, what are our responsible AI principles, what's their process going to be. We think a lot about, and we've been partnering with MSD and others to think about, how do we stand up the right environments? Who can build what? How do we share these agents? How do we go through the security and accessibility and privacy reviews at speed and efficiency? So a lot of those things are important. And I showed you, how do you make sure you build in an audit, mechanism into the agents and into any of the solutions that you build. Those are really important from a finance perspective. So there's some insights from my AI journey, but I hope I answered the question as well about, some kind of pitfalls, things to avoid, and lessons learned.
This has been great, Corey. I appreciate it. I know we're approaching the top of the hour, but in the last 90 seconds, does anybody want to come off mute and follow up with any other questions? This has
I can
been
also, while
great.
people are thinking, I can answer Heather's question here. She asked
Yeah.
about using the best tool for the job. How do you determine the best tool? So generally, it's about kind of capabilities, right? Like I don't know, we've learned a lot of times, for example, if we're trying to build this enterprise grade sourcing agent that can handle a ton of volume, and right now, Foundry is our go-to, right? Like it allows us so much flexibility and the ability to like customize it in infinite varieties of ways, try out different models, lots of things versus Copilot Studio in that instance. In another case, like if we're just trying to build a simple, like populate somebody's close review deck, Azure Foundry would be an overkill for that particular thing. Copilot Studio is great; it's sufficient with a properly deployed tool and a simple knowledge connector to a Fabric data agent, for example. We can do that thing. So we've always got to kind of ask ourselves, because we're paying for the technology too. What can we get by with? What tool can accomplish this task at the scale and scope that we need? So it's always a bit of a balance. But
Yeah. Oh, good stuff. I think
great.
we've got one more question that just popped into the Q&A section. Actually, it looks like another one just showed up as well.
Yeah,
But
good. It's a good one.
how critical is it to have a data lake in place to fully leverage AI and automation tools?
It doesn't have to be a data lake, but it has to be. You have to have some data, unified data platform of some kind, right? I think in the world of Fabric, everything's moving to data mesh. We're thinking about data domains. So it doesn't have to be a data lake, I guess, but from that definition of Azure Data Lake as the product, but you need to have unified data lake. Absolutely, super essential. Every time we build anything, first step is figure out where the data is. How do we get it all into one place? Because generally it's not by nature, and AI struggles with disparate data. So yeah, that's always super important. And then to take Prene's question here in the chat about ERP systems, we have a unique approach here at Microsoft. 30 years ago, we implemented SAP, but 30 years ago, we also decided no one would ever touch SAP, including our technical teams here within our finance team. And so we don't touch SAP. I've heard from customers that's a very tricky situation. We're fortunate that we don't have to deal with it. We extract all SAP data and we put it in data warehouses, and we surround SAP with all of our own homegrown tools over the past 30 years. So that allows us a lot of flexibility and the ability to kind of, accelerate the way that we work. But a lot of customers are struggling with that right now. I do hear that quite a bit.
Oh, that's great.
Anyway, with that, I think I'm a minute over. Thank you again for the invite. It's been a pleasure. Finance is a great, sticky, amazing area. It's a very complicated space, but there's so much opportunity in finance. So I hope you caught the vision of that. I hope you see maybe got some ideas that you can deploy for yourselves. So thank you all.
Yep. I appreciate it, Corey. Thanks again. Thanks for everybody that was able to join and hang on a couple minutes afterwards. Just as a reminder, I'll be putting a copy of the recording along with hopefully most of Corey's slides on the Master Series Hub. On your screen is a URL and a QR code that'll take you straight there, so feel free to bookmark it. But I'll let everybody get to the next meeting. Thanks again, Corey. This has been great and insightful, and I really appreciate everybody's time.
Thanks all. Cheers.